Welcome in, everybody, to Kee On Sports. Today, our guest, very special, actually, Marc Mero. You guys know him from the world of professional wrestling. He's got some great things going on today as well, though. We're going to try to talk to him about all of that. But before I talk too much, I want to welcome him in. Welcome in.
Thanks, Vince, for having me, man. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. I wanted to have you on because you're doing a lot of positive things. So, really, before we get to your wrestling career, could you kind of touch on a few of the things you have going on today?
Well, it's hard to even say this, man. To believe this, I should say, this is my 16th year. A company I founded called Champion Choice, a nonprofit organization where we travel all over the world and speak at schools and corporations, but mainly to students, middle school through college. And it's been a powerful experience, helped a lot of people over the years, and it just seems to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's a very important age. When you look at probably the ages of 13, 14, so seventh grade, eighth grade, up through college. I mean, that's a big deal for a lot of kids, a lot of pressures. Social media now is bigger than ever. And there's pressures coming from everybody. So your positive outlook, what you're doing is just amazing. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, before we get to the wrestling, how could people follow you on that format?
You know what? Anytime you Google my name, my name is Marc, M-A-R-C, M-E-R-O. So it's Marc with a C. A lot of people Marc with a K, but you'll find me very easily. I'm on all the platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. YouTube channel has quite a few subscribers where we put a lot of positive messages out, and you can go see me there at youtube.com/the Marc Mero.
Tremendous stuff. All right. So, hey, speaking of which, I'm glad you mentioned how to spell your name and pronounce it, because one of the earliest memories I have of you, quite frankly, I loved you as Johnny B. Bad, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Loved everything Johnny B. Bad, but it had to be 3 seconds into your WWF career, maybe 4 seconds, and Todd Pettengill butchers your last name. So how do you? I'll never forget it. I'm like, wait a second. How do you actually you pronounce it Mero, correct?
Mero, yeah.
Yeah, simple. Yeah, you were Morrow for about 4 seconds. I'll never forget it. I'm like, what's he doing? I'm like, I don't think you pronounce it that way. But regardless, I did want to ask you to start this off, though. You're obviously still in great shape. How did, because I looked, did some research before wrestling. You had a hell of an amateur career. We knew about the boxing because they put that in your gimmick a couple of times, your boxing, but you also did other things in high school and everything else. How did that help you transition into pro wrestling?
My first love was hockey. I loved hockey. I played hockey all the way up to juniors. And of course, I played football. Our high school football team won the state championship. So I was real instrumental in that. I guess just being athletic, being into all different sports, whether it's hockey, boxing, football. I even played lacrosse. So playing different sports. It was really strange because I didn't sign my first contract till I was 31 years old. And when I was 30, I had a bunch of friends over my apartment, and one of my buddies was flipping through the TV channels, and he landed on professional wrestling. And I just remember just saying, hey guys, I can do that. And they busted out laughing on how these guys will pick me up over their head and throw me right out of the ring. I said, no, I'm being serious. Another friend of mine said, Marc, you're 30 years old. What are you going to do? Start a pro career now? And that just got the engine roaring, man. I just believed in myself. And I found out where there was a wrestling school. I was living in Venice, Florida, and there was a wrestling school run by the Malenkos, Boris Malenko's sons, Joe and Dean. And so I'd start going there on weekends or after work when I could. I'd drive up there. And just 1 year later is when I signed my first contract with WCW as the character Johnny B. Bad.
Now that's something else too, because Johnny B. Bad, and this shows how far we've come as a society, quite frankly, here in 2022. But at that time, okay, flamboyant characters, men who were more glamorous or known as handsome, right? They were heels, they were bad guys. Yeah. So even though you came in with every intention to be a bad guy, to be a heel, you ended up becoming a massive baby face. What was it about that character that you think fans took to and said, hey, we're not going to boo this guy?
It was one of those things where Dusty just gave me a lot of leeway to make it fun. He was such an entertainer himself. So he saw a lot of the character, in him that he wanted me to portray. And I tell you, been some of my fondest memories of wrestling was when Dusty Rhodes would get to the arena early with me and work on how I'm going to walk and talk and be this character, Johnny B. Bad. And we had so many laughs and so many good times. But I just kept making it more and more fun, with whether I was throwing a Frisbee or bringing out the Bad Blaster or, just coming up with taglines, I'll kick your booty with my two-day.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's funny you mentioned Dusty because we had Marcus Alexander Buff Bagwell on the show the other day, and he actually said something about Dusty Rhodes, kept complimenting his teeth, and he said your teeth are way too nice to ever be anything but a baby face. So just what they call Dustyisms, right? So I thought that was kind of funny. But moving on though, you were doing very well. Okay, you were there at an interesting time because in 1994, during the summer of '94, they brought in some really big names. WCW did, guys like Hulk Hogan came in July, then Randy Savage closer to the end of the year. These were big names, but it didn't curtail the run that you were on. How do you feel about that? Because this was at a time when it would have been easy for WCW to kind of push people out, which eventually they did. But for you, you continued to excel even though the big names were there.
I think because it was there was such an energy about Johnny B. Bad. And if you notice, I've done a lot of opening matches for pay-per-views to get the fans involved and get it on an upbeat note. So that was always knowing that. And it's like, I remember wrestling Diamond Dallas Page, like we wrestled a lot of opening matches, and our thing was we are going to have the best match on the card, so we put so much effort into they only maybe give us 12 minutes or something. Right. And in 12 minutes, we said, we are going to tear this house down, and we tried to, and we sometimes really did a great job.
Oh, I thought you were phenomenal. I'll never forget a match you had with Flying Brian Pillman. To open up match, a card.
Yeah.
Fall Brawl,
wasn't it?
Fall Brawl 95.
One of my favorite matches, and Brian was so instrumental in putting that match together because we had to go 30 minutes.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And it was to come up with that many moves and that much, storyline in that time was pretty amazing without a lot of rest holds. We were going pretty hard, and it was it turned out to be a really good match.
It's tremendous. I'm glad you asked that. And for fans, you can obviously see the split screen. He does not have my questions in front of him, but he just knocked off the next two because I was going to ask why you were putting so many opening matches. I noticed it. I thought it was electric that you were. And the next question was about DDP. So that just kind of cracks me up. But to me, this is what I've always known about you, not only as a fan, but now as an adult, right? I mean, I'm 40 years old. I have children of my own. So I look at things a little bit differently now as an adult than I did as a kid watching this stuff. You came across as a character who is respectful, honorable kind of guy. And towards the tail end of your career with WCW, they tried to match you up with Kimberly Page. And for the fans like me at the time, I had no idea that Kimberly was married to Diamond Dallas Page and it was a real thing. I had no idea, So, but this is something that I've read caused a little friction for you. Would you mind talking about that?
Sure. And, it was so blown out of proportion because it was just something that what it was is my young daughter, she was only, she was 7 years old at the time, 7 or 8. She would see me on TV with another woman, and she thought Mommy and Daddy were getting divorced. Aww. And I simply just came to him and said, I don't really need a valet. Johnny B. Bad the character was already over. I didn't need another person. So I simply asked if I could, go on my own and not have to have a valet, Kimberly with me. And Kimberly's wonderful. I have nothing. I love working with Kimberly, but it just caused a little friction in the household. And it was kind of blown out of proportion about this whole religious thing and blah, blah, blah. And so I just, people are going to write and say what they want to say. But from the truth is that it was simply asked if I could, because it did bother my daughter, and it probably bothered my wife at the time too. So I just was hoping they would do that, but
I understand.
The way I wanted.
I get it. I mean, I have a daughter right now who's 8, another daughter who's 5. Me and my wife, very blessed by having 2 daughters. But yeah, they say, what's the old saying? Reality is perception, or perception's reality, or some nonsense. And sometimes little kids think that. So I completely understand where you're coming from. No doubt about it. So hey, take us to Wildman Marc Mero. So how in the world? So we go from watching you, and you were red hot. I mean, you were on fire.
Well, you know, it was, and again, bringing in my then wife, or my wife. Well, actually, I mean, I was married to Rena for 10 years, and I adopted her daughter Mariah, who's we're very close to this day. In fact, she's coming to see me in 2 weeks, spending the summer with me with my granddaughter. But it was when it was one of those deals where Vince gave me everything I wanted. He would not give out guaranteed contracts. I said I had to have a guaranteed contract. I already have one at WCW, and I wanted a signing bonus, and I wanted my wife to travel everywhere I traveled. It's a very unusual request, Vince said. So anyways, to make a long story short, Vince agreed to all these terms. So I was the first one to get a guaranteed contract with WWF at the time.
Right.
And it caused a lot of friction, caused a lot of hard feelings. I mean, they just signed Stone Cold and Mankind to opportunity contracts.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a difficult time, but never realizing it really at the time. When you look at it now, it's like I kind of broke the glass ceiling where everybody gets guaranteed contracts now.
Oh yeah, you did. And so, Foley, he mentioned that in his book. He mentioned how he used you as motivation.
Yeah, and Mick is, gosh, love what Mick does. He's just such an amazing guy. I mean, if really there's some wrestlers that really went on after the business and really kept making a difference, not just being a face for wrestling, but being a face for humanity and helping others and giving better lives to people. And he's given more than anybody even knows, because he doesn't promote it all the time, but he's a real amazing guy.
Absolutely. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times. Again, I find inspiration in everything I do. I've written 10 books. I think number 11 is getting published in September about high school football. You mentioned high school football. I'll have to send you a copy, because that's actually the biggest thing we do at Kee On Sports, truthfully, is high school football. Anyways, Mick Foley, though, when I read his book, it inspired me, like you want to believe, to go out and write books like he did. So just
great.
Like you said, it's where the inspiration comes from. But hey, there's something you said there that, again, fans, I'm telling you, he does not have my questions in front of him, but you mentioned it. You came in during what I call a perfect storm. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Foley, yourself, Triple H was starting to rise at that point. How tremendous was it? And I wrote down a few of those names that you mentioned: Foley, Austin, Triple H. What was it like working with those guys? Because that's when everybody was in their prime.
The guys I wrestled the most in my career are Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H, because we were in both organizations together.
Right.
We had runs in both organizations. We wrestled well over 100 times, maybe even close to 200 times. And then, of course, DDP, because I wrestled them so much on the road when I was with WCW. When we had a long feud going. So we were constantly doing pay-per-view after pay-per-view. And during that feud, we were on the road together all the time, wrestling each other. So we had a heck of a lot of matches. So those three are probably the guys I wrestled the most. And then throw in Steve Regal, and
sure.
They put me on the road with guys that, when I first started, to teach me how to wrestle. I was so green when I first came in. Remember that I just was wrestling a year when I signed my contract. Or learning how to wrestle, anyways. But I had some great matches with all those guys. I mean, Stone Cold, King of the Ring, was amazing.
Absolutely.
Brian Pillman, Fall Brawl, DDP. Many of our pay-per-views were very, very, very good matches.
I
got to wrestle some of the best. I mean, I was there at the Attitude Era. I wrestled The Rock and Undertaker and you name it, and Ric Flair, and wrestled all these guys. Sting when I was with WCW. When you think of it, some of the top guys in the world of professional wrestling, so many were there in that Attitude Era. And I was fortunate enough to wrestle many of the top guys and have some great matches.
You were. And that's the thing. I think you should be in the WWE Hall of Fame based on everybody that you shared the ring with. Everybody got over just tremendous. I mean, you can probably tell from the background. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. So we are Northeast Ohio based, but I'll never forget the Gun Arena. And I still called the Gun all these years later, 96 SummerSlam, you and Goldust. and just how tremendous that match was. But I wanted to ask you, so you're on fire, this red hot baby face, you're IC champion, everything's going good. Unfortunately, you tear, I believe it was your ACL, and had it
It was
take.
my blew out the whole knee. I ACL,
Okay.
medial collateral, meniscus. I had the whole thing redone by Dr. Andrews in Birmingham, and so I was out for 8 months.
Yeah.
And see, that's where it didn't sit well, because now I'm out getting that big paycheck every week, and guys are working towards what the house show is bringing and how many people are drawing at the arenas. And at some of those arenas weren't doing real well at that time. So the guys weren't making very much money. And of course, I'm sitting home with rehabbing my knee.
But
and when you look back at it, it's like you can't blame people for being upset. But now when you really look at the whole picture, like I said, it broke the glass ceiling where everybody's getting guaranteed contracts now.
Sure did. And you had the foresight to do it. I mean, you have to ask, what's the worst that's going to happen? They tell you no. I mean, not only did
what happened was 3 years before when my first contract was up with WCW, Vince flew me up to New York, and I had dinner at his house, and he asked me, what's it going to take to get you to come, because he loved the character,
Yeah.
He said, what's going to take you to come to WWF? And I said, I got to have a guaranteed contract. He goes, we offer opportunity. We don't give guaranteed contracts. And we had a great meal, and we shook hands, and he said, someday we're going to do business together. So 3 years later, my contract is up again, and we go through the same thing. What's it going to take? I said, Vince, I got to have a guaranteed contract. He goes, all right, I'm willing to talk about that. And then when I threw in the signing bonus and my wife, he was like, whoa. But he gave me all three. He eventually gave me all three. And you look at it, I mean, who'd ever think that my ex-wife Sable would become such a huge star herself,
Yeah.
People didn't even know whether she could walk out in front of an audience and not be nervous or whatever, but she really did a great job.
She did. And that's where the story picks up. So you come back from injury, and all of a sudden you're slightly turning towards a heel, because they had the whole jealousy angle. But also during that time, you were part of the you weren't personally part of it, but you were there during what's called the Montreal Screwjob.
Yeah.
I grew up a tremendous Bret Hart fan. To this day, I'm probably the biggest Bret Hart mark you're gonna find. But that night, you're still new to the company. Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, you're there less than 2 years. What was going through your mind when that went down?
I was sitting next to Bret in the dressing room, actually,
Okay.
when he was getting ready and everything. And I just remember thinking, I mean, it was such a shock to everybody. I mean, no one knew about it. I mean, except the people that were involved in it, but
Sure.
none of the boys knew about it. And when it happened, I just remember thinking, there's going to be a riot. There's going to be people hurt really bad, because the crowd is starting to really, gain momentum. Like, it's getting bad. And of course, Bret is kind of inciting it because of his anger,
Right.
So we didn't know whether we're going to get out of there alive or not, And we've had a couple of those incidents where it's been really a tough situation, but it was just so confusing, and like, what was going on? Then next thing you know, Bret punches Vince in the face and knocks him out. And it's just, it was a crazy time.
Did it give you any trepidation of moving forward with the company?
I mean, I was under, like I said, I was under guaranteed contracts. So,
Right.
I'm not going anywhere, but it just, you start thinking that this is a little crazy, man. Like, they basically are in charge of your life. They can make you or break you. They can raise your profile or lower your profile. You can either make money or lose money, so there's a lot that's involved behind the scenes that people don't know about.
And then whose idea was it for you to turn heel upon your return?
It was just I can't remember if it was it may have been Vince Russo's, but it was all brought to us. It was all written out, and we loved it. We loved the idea. Here's the thing that people don't realize, she's just becoming a major star at this point, and she's now making her merchandise is selling sometimes only second to Stone Cold Steve Austin,
Yep.
So, and I'm under a guaranteed contract. So whether they beat me every single night, I'm still making the same amount of money. So as a business decision, we said, absolutely. I mean, they're basically backing up the Brinks truck to our house at this time,
Yeah.
Why not? Why would I say, no, I don't want to do that and never be able to bring her to the stardom that we want. I mean, I was married to her, so seeing her star rise and mine fall, I was fine with that because of the fact that, you always believe you're going to be together forever and you're happy, and it's my wife. I'm proud of her. It was a tremendous angle. And I just remember how much it affected people how much they hated me because of the way I would treat her, but she'd always come out on top. I was always the fall guy, and rightfully so. And when we were writing a lot of this stuff, the handprints for those were my hands. Okay.
Yeah. I would hope so. Yeah.
Those were my hands. But all the things that Vince would come up with, or ideas, whether she was going to wear a potato sack or something, we would get laughing and just like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be so much fun to do this, So it was never anything like I was forced to do it or anything. I didn't want people to think that or to realize the truth. It was all a planned thing that we were all involved with, and it drew really well on the ratings on television.
Oh, I thought it was tremendous. I mean, one of my favorite things that you did during that stretch was the 1998 Royal Rumble, where you come out and you're just kind of shadow boxing and you're just being the biggest heel possible, right? I think it was almost positive Stone Cold comes out, stuns you in the middle of the ring during the Rumble just to pop that guy, because you I mean, excuse my language, but you were being an ass. It was just it was so funny to watch that. And I thought you got the character over to perfection as a heel. During that same stretch, though, and this kind of goes back to the first thing I asked you about being an amateur athlete, about being athletic and doing things before wrestling. You competed in the Brawl for All. Yeah. How serious were you able to take something like that? Like, what was your mindset thinking? Like, hey, I have an amateur reputation, or what were you thinking?
Oh, I didn't care. I mean, when you think about it, that there were so many guys that didn't go in it because they were so worried about getting beat. And I never had fear of, when you get when anyone that's gotten into an MMA match or a boxing match, it really takes a lot of guts to do that. More than ever getting into a wrestling ring when you know what's going to be happening, Sure. And at this point in my life, I'm 38 or 40, almost 40 years old. I've had 14 surgeries. I'm not the same guy that boxed when I was a 17-year-old kid, with speed and agility. And, but the whole thing was, if you notice my match, I've had 2 matches in the Brawl for All, and I never really got hit. I mean, I was taken, they realized they're just going to take me down over and over again. So, yep. And then wrestling, Bradshaw in the match that eventually went to the one that the finals. I believe he lost to
Bart Gunn
in the finals. That was a match I thought I was going to get the decision because we had to go to an extra round. We went 3 rounds, and then they said it's tied. Let's go to one more round, and they gave it to him. And either way, could have gone either way. But I would have liked to fight Bart Gunn because of my boxing background, I would have never been hit by those big shots that he was knocking everybody out with. And if you notice my other match, I never really got hit. I was still pretty elusive of me getting hit, but it was just the takedown. I was never an amateur wrestler.
Are you still a boxing fan today? Do you watch it?
You know what? It's really hard to watch boxing today. And I'll tell you why. There's so many different champions in every division. Yeah. And back in the day, you knew the top 10 guys, that were fighting for the heavyweight title or the light heavyweight or middleweight title, or, when Marvin Hagler was there and Leon and Michael Spinks was the champion and Larry Holmes was the champion. You knew all the guys, And today it's like there's so many championships. When someone goes, I'm the WBO LB something champion, you're like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And so I found myself watching a lot more MMA now. I'm really been a big fan of the UFC and I enjoy that.
So, and one quick thing too, before we kind of wrap things up here, I'll throw it out there too, as a fight fan myself. It used to be on free TV. So when I was growing up, boxing was on free TV, and there was a lot of Americans. Yes, they'd had the big fights on pay-per-view. I understand that. But I mean, right here from Ohio, a friend of mine, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, he was on a regular basis on ABC Wide World of Sports, they would call it. And boxing was able to be seen by kids and young adults, and even by grown-ups for free. So that exposure was out there. That's one of the things that made it big. Plus the fact a lot of Americans fought. Now it's not so much that, right? So you have all the Russians and there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, it's awesome. But the problem is that American sports fans are so conditioned now for baseball, basketball, football, and even hockey and MMA as well. So boxing is really taking that back door. But I'm not going to get on my soapbox there. It's just still one of my favorite sports. But yeah, you hit it on the head, really. So why'd you leave WWF?
I had 3 years left on a guaranteed contract, and I just remember it just wasn't fun no more. My ex was now going into a lawsuit because the guys allegedly cut a hole in the wall and watched her dress, and she's suing them. So I had to go with her and basically just walk away from wrestling. And then she eventually wanted to go back, which was, unbeknownst to me, was the craziest thing, that I could think of at the time, was that she wanted to go back to wrestling. But she did. And that's when we kind of went our own separate ways in life too.
Well, during that stretch too, it was very brief. I think maybe one night you were on WCW Thunder with for like a boxing gimmick kind of thing with, I believe, Ray Ronaldo, your trainer, was with you.
Yeah, Ray was with me.
With Tank Abbott.
I was thinking about going back to the WCW, and it was talked about. Eric Bischoff flew me in for that one night on a private plane, and we discussed it, but we never came to terms, and it really never went to fruition because they really wanted my ex too. They wanted the package deal. And because she was still basically, even though we left WWF, she was still under contract with them. And of course, WCW would have been sued if they would have done anything like that.
One of my final questions for you. This was something to, boy, hard to believe, 13 years ago at this point. No, longer than that, but maybe 15 years ago. You were one of the guys when the Chris Benoit tragedy happened, who was very vocal and very intelligent. The one thing I think everybody was quick to do was to knock professional wrestling, or speak from they shot from their hip or whatnot. Some people had axes to grind. You didn't. Every time you spoke during that entire thing, it was extremely intelligent. What compelled you to help people understand, like the mass media who had never seen wrestling, understand the beating and these wrestlers take, and being on the road, and just steroids and just everything that goes on? Like what compelled you to speak out?
I think there's just a few of us that really had to speak from our heart, because we watched our friends die. I mean, we were friends. Chris Benoit was a friend, Eddie Guerrero. There's so many of my friends that die, even though, what they did was what Chris did was just horrible. But we were all, everyone was shocked by that, but when people don't realize that professional football has a Super Bowl, and then they have 4 or 5 months off before they go back to training camp.
Right.
Bodies rest, they get surgeries, they get taken care of. Our Super Bowl is WrestleMania. The next night we're at Monday Night Raw.
Yep.
You don't get a lot of rest, and you're on the road, and we're doing like 250 cities a year. Your body takes a beating. A lot of guys get addicted to pain medication because they want to perform at a high level, with the steroids and everything else that were involved. And I was there all the years I was there. I was drug tested one time,
Wow.
So it opened the doors now. And when you think back, and I think this is another thing when you look back on my career, that how many guys have really died from drug overdoses in wrestling with WWF or WCW or any of the big organizations. It's very few compared to what was happening back then.
Yep.
And not only that, we now get, there's Olympic drug testing, some of the strictest drug testing. They also give free drug and rehab to everybody that's ever been in a WWE ring.
That's incredible.
And that all came from this whole thing. So, a lot of guys hated me, or, I was vilified and everything, but maybe it saved a life or two, or a lot. You never know, because they had to make changes, and those changes turned out to be pretty good.
Absolutely. I wanted to thank you for your time. Speaking to you as a journalist, I thank you, and quite frankly, speaking to you as someone who grew up a fan, even a bigger thank you from the teenage Vince McKee, quite frankly. So, absolutely wanted to ask you one last time to go ahead and plug your, everything you got going on one last time, so everybody could take it home with them.
Just find me on YouTube, youtube.com, the Marc Mero, and just type in my name, Mark with a C, MARC, MERO, and you'll find me on all the social media platforms. And if you heard me from this show, let me know. Okay.
Absolutely, guys. Check him out. Thank you for your time. Wildman Marc Mero.
Thank you, buddy.
You're very welcome. Have a good day. Thank you.